Of all the troublesome cultural inheritances left to us by Hitler and the Nazis, the most ubiquitous in our modern age might be the big lie. That's the idea that if a political leader tells a lie that is big enough, a certain segment of the population will be inclined to believe it because they'll assume that, well, nobody would make something like that up. It's too big. It's too preposterous. It must be true. Nobody would have the audacity to say something like that if it weren't really true. And Donald Trump has made frequent use of this strategy. Donald Trump's big lie from 2020 was that he actually won that presidential election and that it was stolen from him by Joe Biden and the Democrats. And he repeated it over and over and over again and got most of the Republican Party to back him up on it, even after he lost court challenge after court challenge after court challenge, even after it was established far, far, far beyond the doubt of any remotely reasonable person that Trump's claims were completely false and completely baseless, and there was no evidence whatsoever that Trump actually won that election. They still repeated it and believed it and defend it to this day. And now, in the aftermath of the 2024 election, which Trump did actually win, there's a new big lie. This is a piece from The Guardian by Mehdi Hasan. Headline: Donald Trump didn't win by a historic landslide. It's time to nip that lie in the bud. Remember the big lie? In 2020, Donald Trump lost the presidential election, so Republicans just brazenly lied and insisted he won. In 2024, we have a new post-election lie from the Republican Party. Trump didn't just win, they say, but he won big. He won a landslide. He won an historic mandate for his MAGA agenda. And then Mehdi Hasan goes on to describe how Trump himself and his many surrogates and mouthpieces have repeated this lie over and over again since the election. He didn't just win, he won big. He won so big that now there is an undeniable mandate for the Trump agenda. This is the future that America has chosen. Trump speaks for the people. He speaks for a great, vast majority of the people, except that's not really true. Mehdi Hasan continues, repeat after me. There was no landslide. There was no blowout. There was no sweeping mandate given to Trump by the electorate. The numbers don't lie. And then from later in the article, he continues, and yet the president-elect and his army of Republican sycophants cannot stop bragging about the landslide that wasn't. You almost have to admire their chutzpah. But there is also method to their megalomania. As the political scientist Julia Azari has observed, when a president and a party claim a sweeping mandate, it has historically been connected to unprecedented expansions of presidential power, and can become a way to give an unchecked executive the veneer of following the popular will. Trump, the 49.9% president, doesn't represent the popular will. Yes, he won the election fair and square and won the popular vote for the first time. But if we are to prevent him from expanding his power in the Oval Office, we must resist this new Republican election lie. We must not allow him to pretend that he has some sort of special mandate for controversial policies and personnel. So that is very important to remember and to keep in mind and to answer, to push back against when you hear it and see it. When Trump and his supporters claim that, well, we won the election and it was a massive win and we have a mandate and that means the people want us to do our thing. That's not true. He won the election. He won the election, as far as we can tell, fair and square, but it was not by a historically large margin. He did not even, as it now turns out, now that the votes have all been counted, he did not even win a majority of the popular vote. Whenever Trump or his people try to justify their policies that they're going to attempt to enact over the next 4 years by citing their mandate, we need to remind them, and also continue to remind ourselves, that that mandate does not exist. That is their new big lie. But the big lie is not the only lie that Republicans are telling. And it's not the only example of using this general strategy to try and not only forward their agenda, but also maintain their control of the political narrative in this country and continue to turn that to their advantage. Republicans, like Trump, don't just lie big. They lie small, too, but they use the same strategy as with the big lie. They just repeat the lie over and over again as though it's true. And they figure that the people who agree with them will agree with them and will amplify the lie, and those of us who disagree with them, well, eventually will be drowned out. Will either give up, or the chorus of people who agree with them will grow and become louder and louder, and eventually those of us who challenge their lies will be outnumbered or shouted down, and then the lie will be perceived as the truth, and for all intents and purposes, it will become the truth in the minds of most people. And there's a really ugly and insidious, and at this point, relatively small-scale example of this that I saw the other day on Twitter. And it's this tweet from Michigan State Representative Joshua Shriver, who says, "Make gay marriage illegal again. This is not remotely controversial nor extreme." So the first line of that is just boilerplate Republican conservative bigotry, homophobia, a desire to pull us back into the past, a regressive wish to take rights away from people who have rights that this asshole Josh Shriver thinks they don't deserve to have because he personally disapproves of their orientation, of who they are, of their sexuality, whatever. But the really, really insidious part is that second line, when he not only says, "Make gay marriage illegal again," but he justifies it by claiming that this is not a controversial position. This is not an extreme position. He's claiming that he's just saying something reasonable, and something that, because it's not controversial, implicitly, something that most people agree with. Let's make gay marriage illegal again. Most people want it. It's a consensus opinion. It's not controversial. Why can't we do it if it's not controversial? And at this point, I think most people outside of that right-wing homophobic bubble will look at a tweet like this, will look at a statement like this, whatever platform it's presented on, and will recognize it for what it is, and will say, fuck that guy, and will remember that same-sex marriage has been legal in the United States nationwide for about 10 years at this point, and has been legal in certain states for much longer than that. It's become relatively normalized. Civilization has not collapsed. The sky has not fallen. Everything's fine. It's normal. There's nothing to worry about. It's been legal in many other parts of the world for many, many years. It's not going to hurt anything. There's nothing to worry about. The legality and acceptance of same-sex marriages and of same-sex couples in general, whether they get married to each other or not, is what should be regarded as uncontroversial. Same-sex couples deserve to get married to each other if they want. That is not controversial. That is not remotely controversial. That is not extreme. That's the fact. But, according to Josh Shriver and people who agree with him and employ this kind of a tactic, it's the other way around. And the really upsetting part is it works. It works when Republicans and extremists on the right, whether they identify with the Republican Party or not, we know how they vote, so, one's as good as another. When they say things like this, and they say these things often enough, and with enough confidence and conviction, what happens is, not only do other people see that and go, oh, It's not remotely, I don't like gay people either. I guess most people agree with me. I represent the majority opinion. And that emboldens people who feel that way. That encourages them to continue speaking out and encourages them to express even more extreme views. And the ball just rolls further and further down the hill and keeps picking up speed. And what also happens, and this is the part that really pisses me off, eventually, when narratives like this take hold among enough people, there are certain outlets in the mainstream media that will treat these viewpoints with respect, surely because they are accepted by a large number of people. So you might have a supposedly respectable newspaper, let's say, like the New York Times or the Washington Post or some other big mainstream news outlet, or maybe a cable news channel like CNN or MSNBC, that will treat this not as though it's self-evidently true, but as though it is entitled to a certain degree of respect and tolerance, simply because it seems like a lot of people believe it. And they won't say, Representative Josh Shriver expressed on Twitter today that gay marriage should be made illegal again and said this is not remotely controversial nor extreme, even though opinion polling over the last several years suggests that this position actually is an outlier now among the American people. Like, they won't refute it. They won't factually refute it. They won't say, as they are reporting on it, that this isn't true, that the way Josh Shriver is characterizing it is inaccurate. He says banning gay marriage now is an uncontroversial and not extreme position, but in actuality, it is controversial and it is extreme when compared to the mainstream belief and general acceptance of same-sex marriage and same-sex couples and homosexuality in the United States among the people, in the popular culture, etc., etc. So they don't do that. They don't say, this is what he's saying and he's lying. He's wrong. He's mischaracterizing it. They'll describe it in some neutral way. They'll say, a lot of people believe, or he's speaking for many people. Many conservatives have still refused to accept that same-sex marriage is legal and that it is a normal and healthy thing. They characterize it in very neutral, non-judgmental language, because some of these news outlets, like the New York Times, like CNN, like, the Washington Post, a lot of other sort of mainstream, very well-established news sources, and when I say they, I mean the top-level editors, the owners, they are so terrified that anybody would ever be able to look at a story they published and try to claim that they took one side or another. Oh, we don't want to be perceived as pro-gay. We don't want to be perceived as anti-gay either, so we're going to split the difference. And what that does is it treats a position like that from Josh Shriver as equivalent to a position from just any random person who might say, I have no problem with same-sex marriage. Do I think same-sex marriage should be made illegal again? No. What's the point? It's fine. We've had it for a while. It's none of my business. It's fine. Like, not even a dedicated, energetic, passionate activist for LGBTQ plus rights. Just some random schmo who's like, oh yeah, gay people, they've been able to get married for a while now. It seems fine. Not really any of my business. Like, that person is probably closer to the mainstream of American society in terms of views and feelings on homosexuality and same-sex marriage than this asshole Shriver, who's like, it's not even controversial. It's not remotely controversial. We should make it illegal again. But his view and the view of a person going, no, it's fine, would be given equal weight and would be treated as though they are both equally true or equally reasonable. And who does that serve? People like Josh Shriver, people like Donald Trump, the people who are pushing the big lie and the 1,000 little lies that they are injecting constantly into the national conversation, into the culture, into the media, insisting that they actually speak for the majority when they don't, insisting that most people agree with them when they don't, insisting that they have a mandate to impose their values on the rest of the country when they have no such mandate. And that's why it's so important to not just fight back against the big lie, but to fight back against all of these insidious little lies. When people on the right try to tell you that their bigoted, extremist, hateful, ignorant viewpoint is not only their opinion, and is not only a view they hold because they feel personally justified in it for whatever reason, but it represents the majority of people. It's the default position. No, the fuck it's not. And don't ever let them get away with saying it is.